Humans have taken drugs for thousands of years, and obviously they're still widely taken today, with this number actually increasing across the last few years. Now, when we say for thousands of years, it's not actually an exaggeration. In fact, it actually predates ancient civilization, going all the way back to prehistoric humans. In this time, these drugs have obviously changed a lot. The composition has changed, their reason for taking it has changed, and even their logistics has changed. Our ancestors did not use the same heroin that a user would be found with today, as is the same with almost all of these substances. And some are even new to the scene, spawning in the last 50 years or so. But obviously it all started somewhere. Trying to pinpoint and start some sort of drug-based timeline is highly difficult. But hey, let's give it a go. Spanning as many different drugs, from the most dangerous and their descendants to those used by pretty much everyone in society. This is the entire history of drugs, I guess. Now, as said, the timeline starts probably over 10,000 years ago, and it sees humans consume their first drug. Can you guess what it is? It's the obvious: alcohol. Humans have been getting tipsy for millennia, but how this actually began is honestly really quite interesting. The alcohol at the time is a lot different to the alcohol we consume today. You didn't need hops and cat urine to make it, as you find you do nowadays. You just need water and honey, which obviously existed all these years ago. It's actually thought that this creation happened entirely by accident. Honey may have been left exposed to natural yeast in the environment for too long, and then mixed with rain, you have mead, and all it takes is one caveman to just have a swig, and boom, he's tipsy. And even then, this would give the same effects as it would today. For all we know, we had cavemen with greater confidence in hunting and mating, leading to perhaps genuine production of the beverage prehistorically, because they want these effects repeated, and then it's passed down. It would eventually be consumed in social contexts and religious ceremonies, so just like that we have our first drug. We also find these drawings in Algeria expected from 1,000 years later of these mushroom-looking objects, but that's for a little later. So before we jump the gun, we need to advance the timeline to 3400 BCE and take our travels to Mesopotamia, because one plant is about to take drug consumption to new heights, or highs. For this is the joy plant, or as we call it today, the poppy, and it's how we get opium-based drugs. It's actually divided if the poppy was first cultivated in Europe or the Middle East, but it seems as though the Sumerians were the first to use it as a drug. So we'll just use that. They grow poppies and harvest their seeds, opening them for the milky sap to run out. They let this sap dry and then inhale the burnt fumes or mix it with other substances, likely to relieve pain and induce sleep. Which is kind of what we use it for today. It's basically old morphine and heroin. Eventually, opium would spread to the civilizations in ancient Greece and ancient Rome thousands of years later, also eventually crossing the Silk Road. And before this actual process with ancient Rome and ancient Greece, drugs were also being shipped out of China. In fact, only around 400 years following the discovery of the medicinal properties of the poppy, China found early cannabis. Hemp fibres had actually been used for a long time at this point, being used for textiles and rope, with the seeds also being used for food. It was quite nutritious. But when Shen Nong, the mythical father of Chinese medicine, included cannabis in his pharmacopoeia, it kind of took off. He described its use in medicine for pain, gout and rheumatism, and was also used as anaesthetic in ancient Chinese procedures. Shamans began using it for the psychoactive properties, especially in Taoism, for the altered states of consciousness. The use declined with Confucianism, with order and control becoming the dominant philosophy, but by this point it was already well known about and well used. And on the other side of the world, we've got two major players about to enter the game in the Americas. It's still around 1000 BC and the coca leaf has been discovered to have medicinal properties in the Andes Mountains. It's chewed for pain relief and eventually gets cultivated. Meanwhile, a bit further north, those in Mesoamerica have eaten these psilocybin mushrooms, and they love their effects. They actually have drawings of them which we can still find to this day. Now, this is a lot of information before the year even hits 0, so let's advance the clock a little bit and see where we end up. We're finally in the years AD and drugs have actually come a long way since. Even though it was found before in BCE, the betel nut is gaining a lot of traction and is becoming significantly more popular across Southeast Asia and China. It's not actually a nut, but a seed of the areca palm, and activates the same receptors as nicotine does. It's actually classed as one of the most addictive substances of all time. But one of the key differences in this period is that humans are becoming more nomadic and spreading their cultures and practices. Trade was a huge contributor in spreading drugs, but they didn't really see them as drugs, instead essential commodities for earning money in. For example, the early Russian people, or the Kievan Rus derivatives at the time, heard about cannabis in China and started using it in their rituals. Cannabis is now in Europe, and hemp is now grown here too. Opium is also highly prevalent in China, and that'll play a bigger role soon. The latest drug to actually arrive on the scene is coffee. It was actually found in around the 9th century, significantly advancing the timeline a good few centuries in Ethiopia. It's believed to be the goat farmer Kaldi who saw his goats eat the coffee beans and then develop a lot more energy. Coffee eventually spreads quickly after knowing these effects, taking over the Middle East rampantly. In Turkey, hundreds of years later, coffee shops were everywhere, and at the same time this was happening, Columbus was preparing to travel across the Atlantic. Upon arriving there, the Native American population, and those in the Caribbean, were found to be using a lot of tobacco, which grew there naturally. The Europeans tried it, and they loved it, and it was one of the things to be fetched back first. So now nicotine has been brought over from the New World. Further conquistadors not long after found the Aztecs continuing their use of psilocybin as mentioned earlier, but they actually put a stop to it upon colonising the area, yet they still fetched them back to Spain, and boom, now not only is nicotine and tobacco back in Europe, but so are magic mushrooms. In return, we give the native population a load of diseases, but also cannabis, which has taken off even more in Europe. Soon to start hashish clubs in places like Paris, where the elite would consume it for inspiration. The Spanish also tried to ban the coca leaf from the Inca people in the Andes, but this didn't really work. They eventually found its properties also quite useful, and they fetched that back to Spain too. And trade with the colonies, if you can call it that, happened very frequently, sharing these drugs with greater places around the globe. In fact, opium was still going very strong in India and the Middle East, and the British East India Company, in around the 17th and 18th century, began cultivating it massively. But this would actually lead to huge social and economic consequences. In fact, tension over this opium led to huge conflict between Britain and China. China was suffering economically and wanted to stop importing as much, but the British Empire smuggled it in anyway, and due to its addictive nature, it got the Chinese population ridiculously dependent. It's believed as high as 40 million citizens were addicted to opium at this time. China eventually conceded and gave Britain Hong Kong. So now we've progressed from simple plants growing and medieval traditions to global conflicts and warfare. But even in the modern era, drugs have still come a long way. Perhaps more internal wars, but led more by science. So let's discuss that and advance the timeline a little more. The modern era is probably best defined as drugs becoming a story of scientific innovation, global conflict and societal change. New substances have been uncovered and battles over prohibition have occurred. For example, in the late 19th and early 20th century, we isolated and synthesized compounds like morphine, heroin and cocaine from their natural sources. Firstly, barbiturates were composed in 1864, one of the first to be composed without plants. Then, Bayer in 1898 proposed heroin as a safer alternative to morphine as it was supposedly less addictive. Maybe this didn't turn out too well, but we have actually gone from this little plant millennia ago to this. These desired properties the Spanish found from the coca leaf also made cocaine production significantly more common, even putting it in Coca-Cola before the dangers were fully understood. Amphetamines also entered the scene about here, another product from science and not from a plant, as did benzodiazepines for sleep, again no plants needed. Science evolved beyond the need. And while we're on the topic of the Spanish, their oppression of psychedelics that we mentioned was short-lived. MDMA was actually first synthesized in 1912 for use as a therapeutic tool, with LSD arriving shortly after in 1938 by Albert Hofmann. General psilocybin mushrooms also significantly resurfaced. These became a key part of the hippie movement and the culture had them spread more. Ketamine also enters the scene about here in 1962 as a supposed better alternative to anesthetic. It's currently used today for depression. And the thing is, more and more drugs are still arising today. We've got fentanyl emerging in the last few decades, even more powerful than heroin, with the new nitazines on top of that, with news actually coming out about them maybe 2 years ago. The cartel is exporting mass quantities of cocaine, and the war on drugs tried to punish all these takers, but this has obviously caused more harm, and we've lost. It's quite odd to think a substance taken for thousands of years ends up being banned in our time period. And in the present, we're actually seeing changes in the law. Portugal decriminalised everything, and this has worked really well for them. And cannabis is currently becoming legal across the globe if you pay attention to the news. So there you have it, an origin story of the key players. What started out as simple plants helping culture and tradition are now huge factors in society thousands of years later. But what do you think will happen in the future? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. And if you don't, well, no drugs for you. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It's free and it really helps me out. See you next time.